Canada is absolutely furious at Donald Trump and his despicable regime, and this was the message from Canada over the past few months. We've warned you once, Donald. We've warned you twice. And now we've just taken decisive action to outmaneuver, to checkmate, to outmatch the United States, and to create a new global world order. Canada working side by side with China, working side by side with Europe, and cutting the United States out. Also working side by side with South America, Africa. Yep, Donald, there are other countries in the world. And as you keep talking about invading Greenland and making yourself the dominant predator of the Western Hemisphere, guess what Canada is doing? It just announced a $1 trillion trade pact with China. Yep, over the past few days, there was this very incredible state visit by Prime Minister Carney of Canada. He went there to China. He met with Xi Jinping and other top-level ministers in China. They announced that Canada would be pulling back its tariffs against Chinese EVs. It would start to be phased in, and it would happen gradually, but 49,000 EVs from China will be allowed to come into Canada now at a most favored nation tariff rate. So it's about 6%. In return, China will be dropping some of its tariffs against Canada on canola and other Canadian products. But this is part of a broader relationship as well, where Canada is going to see significant investments by China in liquefied natural gas, the LNG, and in general, the Canadian oil company are going to be benefiting significantly. And this is especially important as Donald Trump wants to claim that he's now the emperor of Venezuela, okay, and propping up his authoritarian proxy, Delcy Rodriguez there, and throwing Maria Corina Machado under the bus after stealing her Nobel Peace Prize. You know, China and Canada have a plan. And the language that Prime Minister Carney used while he was in China is that there is a new world order right now that exists. And in this new world order, you're going to see a lot more robust trading relationships with places like China. Here's Prime Minister Carney talking about a new world order. Play this clip.
I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
Then Prime Minister Carney went into detail about the Chinese electric vehicle agreement. Here's what he discussed. Let's play it.
Let's put this in context. 49,000 vehicles, which is the cap on Chinese electric vehicle exports to Canada. That's part of this agreement. That's a return to levels last seen in 2023, the last full year before the Canadian tariff actions. That's the first point. Second point, again, to put it in, dimension it, that's less than 3% of the size of the Canadian auto market. The third point, to put in context, and I reference this, is that part of this agreement, and it takes a few years to build this, a couple of years to build this, that an increasing portion of those exports will be in a new segment of the Canadian market. In other words, electric vehicles that cost less than $35,000 at the landed price. So there's huge opportunity here to get more affordable cars in the electric vehicle market for Canada. The fourth element, and in many respects the most important element, is the beginning of discussions and expectation of Chinese investment in Canada and partnership in Canada to produce vehicles over time, so to partner with Canadian firms.
Prime Minister Carney went on to say that by 2030, Canada will produce 50 million tons of LNG, which will be destined for markets in Asia and especially China. Canada is going to grow very rich and prosperous by these moves that Prime Minister Carney is doing. Let's play this clip right here.
On the other hand, Canada is developing our oil and natural gas reserves, one of the world's largest, to be the lowest risk, lowest cost, and lowest carbon. Last June, we exported our first LNG shipment to Asia, and we're scaling up quickly, making major investments in streamlining approvals. By 2030, Canada will produce 50 million tons of LNG each year, all of which will be destined for Asian markets.
Now, while Prime Minister, I just want to show you the contrast here, right? So while Prime Minister Carney is out there and he is making these methodical, meticulous deals representative of a multilateral system of trade, of sovereignty, of mutual cooperation and respect, of moving past problems that existed between China and Canada. And they were very much a lot of tension there for a lot of things. I mean, recently China had been accusing Canada of taking prisoner the Huawei, one of the biggest companies in China's family member, at the request of the United States. And there was a whole diplomatic, fight that was taking place. But just I want to contrast right here. This is Donald Trump from yesterday saying, "I'm the tariff king. I'm the tariff king." Here, play this clip.
Understood how to deal with him, and I'm the tariff king, and the tariff king has done a great job, and I hope we win the Supreme Court case, because if we don't, be a shame for our country. Be a shame.
You're the tariff king. And here was Donald Trump threatening to tariff Greenland. He goes, tariffing any country that does not support the United States invading Greenland. Here, play this clip.
After another, I called Germany. No, we will not do that. I said, no, we're going to put a 25% tariff, which is, by the way, about 7 times more than they would have to pay by raising their drug, like 7 times. This wasn't like a little bit more, 7 times more. And I may do that for Greenland, too. I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland, because we need Greenland for national security. So I may do that. I'll give you a little, I'll take you out of that. In fact, that'll end up being the story. But actually, this is a much bigger story, because we're reducing healthcare by numbers that you haven't seen.
Now, contrast that to Prime Minister Carney when he was asked, so what do you mean by a new world order? And watch what Carney says. Let's play this clip.
Prime Minister Brian Platt with Bloomberg News. Yesterday, when you met with Premier Lee, one of the things you said in the public remarks was this partnership with Canada and China, this new partnership, sets us up well for the new world order. What did you mean by that? What is the new world order?
Well, it's a great question, Brian, because I think the world is still determining what that order is going to be. And let's be clear what we're talking about first and foremost, which is what is going to govern global trade? What is the role of the WTO going to be? How important are bilateral deals such as the one we're developing, plurilateral deals, if I can use that term, Trans-Pacific Partnership, potential linkages between Trans-Pacific Partnership and the EU? Where is financial regulation, payment system regulation going to fit into that? All of these aspects, use fancy words like the architecture, the multilateral system that has been developing these is being eroded, to use a polite term, undercut, use another term. So the question is, what gets built in that place? How much of a patchwork is it? How much is it just on a bilateral basis? Or where do like-minded countries in certain areas? So like-minded countries, just to be clear, doesn't mean you agree on everything. Aspects, for example, on digital trade or agricultural trade, climate finance as another area, to move into areas of geostrategy, geosecurity. You will have different coalitions that are formed. So what this partnership does is in areas, for example, of clean energy, conventional energy, agriculture, as we were just talking about, and financial services, which we've talked less about, but the evolution of the global financial system, the role of the renminbi over time, the evolution of cross-border payments. I know it all sounds very dry, except for your organization, which I think takes an interest in it. These are important elements of how the system is going to work. And look, the expectation is that rather than these being developed necessarily through the IMF, WTO, and other multilateral organizations, it is going to be coalitions that develop them not for the world, but for subsectors of the world.
Now, a man who needs no introduction, but I'll give him an introduction. Let's bring in Charlie Angus, who leads Meidas Canada, the leader of the Meidas Canada resistance tour in Canada. He's in Edmonton right now. He's traveling around the area. And you may be, if you're in Canada, you could watch and be there for one of the Meidas Canada events. Let's bring in Charlie Angus. Charlie, you're in Edmonton right now where you're hosting some events. We'll talk about those events that you're doing at the end of the interview because I want people to be there and show up and see you there. This video is going to air on Saturday, so you can talk about what's happening over the weekend. But let's talk about first what's going on with this deal. You and I have been talking about that this was on the horizon. Now that this happened, it clearly is a pivot away from the American. Not even a pivot, a giant leap forward. What do you make of it all?
This is a game changer, I think, that's going to play out for years and decades to come. And it happens when Pete Hoekstra, a mega Pete Hoekstra, my best friend, the American mega ambassador, was just on a talk radio show in Montreal saying, we don't need anything from Canada, repeating this idiotic line. And we're like, okay, fine. What Carney has done here is significant. He's won huge concessions for Western Canada, and I'm in Western Canada right now, which is traditionally voted much more conservative in terms of canola markets. Getting that Chinese canola market back will be an enormous benefit as we see the American Farmageddon continues. Trump has crushed so much of the American Midwest farming because of the losses to China. Well, we are picking back up. So that's what he's gotten. The EV deal is enormous. So sure, it's only 49,000 vehicles, but when you're starting to bring top quality vehicles into the country at $30,000, electric cars, that's going to be a game changer. And what it means is that we're going to have to pivot away. And Donald Trump's been demanding that we pivot away. He says they don't want to be part of, he was just, I think, in Dearborn. He says, we don't want to have any Canadian cars, blah, 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 blah. Our auto sector is so integrated with Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky. We are part of this ecosystem of trade. Well, I think what Carney's saying is that that's gone. So if Trump pulls out the auto market on us, we have to shift and we have to pivot. And moving with the Chinese, I was really interested that Carney says the long term, this is about further investments, which I think is we're going to start to see Chinese plants being built in Canada. So cars are built here. It will also mean a huge shift for the kind of cars that are made in Canada. And we have an enormous advantage over the United States because we have all the critical minerals necessary for the batteries and to create EV. So the potential for Canada is enormous. There will be political risks. He's going to need to deal with the auto sector towns who are obviously very uncertain. He's going to have to make an offer to Doug Ford, our premier, who's going to be shouting and hollering about this. But he's also now started to build alliances where the Western premiers who normally are going MAGA Maple are going to be a lot more wary about speaking up against the prime minister who's delivered such a substantive deal on canola.
So what happens next here? How are the people in Canada feeling about this? And these are big changes that are happening very quickly. And the latest polling, not just in Canada, I just saw a polling in Europe. America's approval in Europe, or like the Europe people viewing America as an ally, only like 25%, or like 20, I think it was 16% of Europe now believes America is actually an ally of Europe. 16%. I think in the UK it was 25% also. So not very popular to be America in the world right now.
Well, I think what's happening is that we're on the eve of the renegotiations of the CUSMA agreement, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement, where 90% of the trade between the United States and Canada is under tariff-free agreements. And Donald Trump has been saying again and again, we don't need this, we don't like this, we're going to rip it up. Pete Hoekstra saying that. I think they've decided that they're going to play hardball. The last time they played hardball with us, they lost their bourbon market, they lost their wine market, they've lost billions of dollars in tourism, but they haven't learned the lesson. I think they're going to go for broke this time, and that Prime Minister Carney making this deal with China will enrage Trump. I think you're going to see him threatening us. You're going to see an increasing backlash. But Canada is a much tougher country now than we were last year. I think Canadians are ready for it. It's going to be interesting to play out domestically. It was really funny if you watch the video that of where Prime Minister Carney says New World Order, the person beside him is Premier Mo, one of the mega maple premiers, and he sort of just does this hilarious, oh my God, did he just say that? Because the right-wing conspiracy nutters are going to be going New World Order. Pierre Poilievre and his mega machine here will be going on against China. So he's put the right wing into a box here of if they're going to start to attack the China agreement, I think they're going to start to sound more and more hysterical. It does have political risk. The prime minister is going to need to be able to tell Canadians how this is going to help. And I think he really needs to go to towns like Windsor and Oshawa, the big automaker towns, and say, I've got your back. We're going to start to look at how we do the production lines here. He has to, I think, really, it's important that he doesn't leave the auto sector out hanging because there's going to be some uncertainty at this point, but it's all doable and it could be a serious win-win-win for Canada at a time when Trump has just said again and again how much he dislikes us and hates us and doesn't want us. So we're moving on.
It seems that Prime Minister Carney has been very deliberate about the CUSMA renegotiation. And for those in the U.S., we sometimes call it the USMCA, United States, Canada, Mexico Agreement. In Canada, it's CUSMA, the Canada, United States, Mexico Agreement, being renegotiated. It seems that what Carney's been doing is, right now, buy time, basically. A lot of the tariffs that Trump has, announced, a lot of them sting. A lot of them, though, are still covered by the CUSMA exemption. And so, some people were saying, well, why is Carney showing up there and still being nice and saying these things? But ultimately, Carney didn't do any of the tariff deals when Trump was making the fake tariff deals with people. He just kind of dragged it along and dragged it along and dragged it along while cutting these other deals. And you and I have talked a lot about them. Deals with Europe. Deals with South America, now big deals with, China. And I think that I think the view is Donald Trump's going to blow up CUSMA regardless. And we have to proceed as though CUSMA is not going to exist and prepare and fortify ourselves for that. What do you think about that? I mean, Trump's going to play games until the end. Ultimately, once Trump sees our stock markets crash, he then kind of chickens out and then, and then deals with it. What do you see in there?
Well, we know that, Canada has basically three options. One is to suck up and hope and take some hits in key sectors and life will go back to normal. That would have been what Canada probably did before Trump started threatening us in January of last year. The second option is to go for broke and face down and see who blinks first. We're seeing that many, many people in politics and in business in the United States are getting more and more concerned about Trump's threats with CUSMA because it's going to create economic chaos. And maybe the United States, despite being much bigger than us, is going to blink first because of the enormous economic uncertainty Trump's caused. I think we're looking at the third option, which is Canada has to decide to stop being a client state of the United States. That we've been involved since 1988. We were sold on free trade. We were sold on globalization. What is it going to be the cost for us to be an independent nation that can protect our democracy? And so instead of a porous border, a back and forth, we basically build a moat. That is going to cost a lot. It's going to hurt. It's going to cost jobs. But I don't think that's a question anymore for bankers and businessmen. I think it's a question for the Canadian people. And whether I'm here in Edmonton or whether I'm on the East Coast or on the West Coast or even in the industrial towns, my sense is that Canadians understand the cost of freedom now. And if it's going to hurt, well, let's make it hurt and we will survive and we will build a nation that can trade, and we will trade with China. We will trade with Europe, but we also need to be a nation that can be self-sufficient. That's the threat Donald Trump put at us. I think 2026 will be the year that we decide what we're willing to pay in order to protect our democracy and our rule of law and our independence as a nation. And the reality is that Donald Trump hasn't really given us much choice. So I think option number 3 is the one on the table. And I think Canada is moving forward.
So, Charlie, we know Donald Trump and his regime watches this program. They watch you very carefully. So what is your message to Donald Trump right now at this moment in history?
Donald, you blew it. I mean, your guy Pete Hoekstra, come on. Can't you find anybody that's more credible than that? Who, on the eve of this historic negotiations with the Chinese, where we do huge breakthroughs in EV technology, huge breakthroughs in energy, huge breakthroughs for our farm sector, says, we don't need you, we don't like you, whatever. Are you going to threaten us again? Yeah, you're going to threaten us again. Are you going to threaten our democratic allies? Yeah, you're going to threaten them. Are you going to continue to kowtow to Putin because you're an authoritarian bootlicker? Absolutely. Do you think someone's going to give you, go to eBay and get you another Nobel Peace Prize? Maybe. But at the end of the day, you haven't earned any of that. You don't deserve any of that because you are a criminal, Donald. You're a grifter. And we know that. And you know that we know that. And that's why you hate us so much as Canadians, because we look you in the eye and we know exactly who you are. And we will never bow and kiss your gangster ring. So suck it up, Donald.
And Charlie, this episode that you and I are doing, it's going to be airing on Saturday. So if people want to watch you, if people want to see you in person during your Meidas Resistance tour, where can they see you, Charlie?
Right now we are in Calgary and Edmonton. There's a huge recall movement. So the right-wing government in Alberta decided that citizens could recall their members of the Legislative Assembly if they weren't doing the job of the people. Well, there's massive recalls underway now. I think there's 24 of them. People are going door to door to throw the bums out. This is grassroots democracy in Alberta because Alberta is very much the front line of the fight against MAGA. So it's a very exciting time here. And for those in the rest of Canada and all over the world, you can count the people of Alberta are going to be strong. And we sold out the Calgary Town Hall in 48 hours notice. Now we're having to plan to come back. That's how much interest there is here for the Meidas Canada resistance movement. And we've got a huge number of communities starting basically right now for the new year, all across Ontario, all across British Columbia, we are on the road because it's about building democracy at the local level. It's about meeting people and it's about empowering communities and learning lessons from the community. So we've got a very, very heavy schedule coming up.
Everybody make sure you subscribe to the Meidas Canada YouTube channel. Charlie Angus, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.